There we go. All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another Visual and Performing Arts PD Hour here, hosted by the Maine Department of Education. My name is Jason Anderson. I'm your VPA Content Specialist at the DOE, and I'm pleased to have as a guest presenter one of your esteemed colleagues from the Auburn School District, Linda Leonis, and she is going to talk to you about mindful safe spaces in your classroom, as well as SEL protocols. And what was the term that you gave me? Willing able, right? You have a willing able chart or rubric that you are going to share with people on that. So we're talking about safe spaces in your classroom today for your students, and I think it goes without saying that given all of the pandemic things that we've all been through in the last several months, our students have definitely suffered considerably from that in different ways. And so when they come back to our classrooms, it's going to be really important, I think, that we are as mindful as we can be to where they were when they left us, where they are now, and where we would like to take them. So Linda, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Jason. Hi, everyone, good afternoon. So I am here in my classroom at Washburn School in Auburn, and I am a K6 visual arts teacher, and I have two schools here in Auburn that I travel between. I also used to work in the Lewiston School Department. So some of the things I'll share today are products that I did pick up along the way in Lewiston. And a lot of the safe spaces that I use in my room are alternate spaces. So as students may be having a difficult moment, they're spaces that they feel free to go to. Most times we establish a protocol about when to use it and how to use it. And I'll talk a little bit about that. I'll share a slideshow with you in a minute. But I did want to share with you a few things from this space. So while I teach K6 art, I also keep some tools and things with me that I feel are geared more towards the middle schooler. We have a lot of GT students in our district that have different needs than if I had a felt board for my younger students that prefer that. So I try to alter the spaces for a different range of ages. So if you teach high school or middle school, they might be things that you can implement as well within your classroom environments. So I am sitting here in one of the spaces. I keep one space outside my classroom at both schools. We have a truss system. For the most part, it's worked really well with students. And so I am in one that's just outside my classroom door, and it gives the student a little more privacy for days where they require privacy. And within this space, it's a cartooning area, and I have a book with no words. It's just a visual story, and it's about communication through art images and cartooning. So I also keep like the different graphics markers, pens, pencils. I always try to look ahead and foresee, because when we're in stress, we might press down harder, tools can break. Like we said, it's a safe space, no expectations. If a tool breaks, I try to look ahead and make sure there's a tool there that helps fix that. There's additional tools, additional paper. I also keep the pencil sharpeners for them as well, so that if something happens, it's not a stressful thing where they're going to feel worse, that they feel like something broke. It's there for them to be able to feel comfortable and use. So I'm going to start and share my screen with you and start with a slideshow. This was intended to go to the national convention in Minneapolis this year. And this sort of workshop came out as a result of being in Boston's convention last year. We had a wonderful presentation by a group in Florida. Friends were talking about the positive behavior system and PBIS implementation. And quite a few people that attended the Boston convention were concerned with the yeah, what about? The yeah, but students when this happens. We know that some behavior systems like PBIS reach pretty much like 80%. And there's always that extra 20% where our tier 1 implementations in the classroom, like our class rules or the things we have with students, they might not reach that 20%. So this kind of came out as a result to sort of be a roundtable discussion for people to discuss issues they were having in their classroom with students, the wait time for administration or support staff if something is happening. And basically it was set up as that roundtable. So this is a very different format. So I'm just going to go through a few slides quickly, and we will have time to talk, especially where I see we're well represented from upper level grades. So in sharing this slideshow, I can see if we move, my visual of people is on the right. If you slide over the screen with the people's faces that are attending this session, you'll see an image of a sculpture that is a knife. So that's my yeah but student from last year. And so this is talking probably more for intentions to reach students like that where they're in those shutdown modes or volatile modes. So moving my slide, you can see this is a group of students working collaboratively. We have T-note charts. As they work, we have the studio habits. It's about taking your actual, like trusting yourself as an educator to get those tier 2 steps to help those students that might be like creating the knives or shutting down and refusing to work. It's how can we take those things we already use for the mainstream class and changing them just a little bit so that they will work for those students. So as I look, I took like the star chart when they're working in groups, we try to give stars as they're meeting different things. The group that earns the most, we try to get a little competition going, a friendly competition. You know, students really respond to students. And as a team might be not making as many, you know, points, they'll encourage each other. So a lot of times that friendly competition helps. When you have a student, when we're working independently, I have the sticker charts that might work for them at their seat. One student last year came in and had difficulty getting started with work, more than one. I implemented that independent chart where I had them draw either 5 smileys. If some like sports, they chose to draw basketballs. So the goal was to have one goal. You're having trouble getting started with work. This is what our goal is. Each time I notice you doing this, it also reminded me to give that positive feedback. Sometimes it's hard. You have a lot of kids. Our art rooms are active. I tend to, you know, we can get caught up in a moment and maybe a face comes out that we don't want to come out. So by taking like those class type techniques, I've just given them to independent students and put them in front of them. And it's a great reminder for myself too when things are stressful. And I feel like their feedback, the one student that I was thinking of that I started talking about who was having difficulty starting his work, by February, it was amazing. He was just starting work on his own without reminders and without this chart. So within half a year, it really had worked for him as an individual support. When it becomes a lot of times like behaviors, ones that are really trying to hold out, a lot of times it's about a reflection, and after chatting with them, coming up with a please stop chart or a stop and think chart. And as a result of just a conversation, maybe over breakfast or lunch, we'll come up like in the middle. It's a simple chart where they keep it in their art portfolio, and it reminds them, here are my options. They can, sometimes it's doodle on their portfolio cover, or grab their sketchbook and find one of our safe corner spaces that they can go to. And I try to remind them, I want them to be developing the behavior for themselves. So our goal in setting up a plan for them and practicing that plan is that they'll start taking it upon themselves. They know themselves. And if we're busy with other students, they're given permission to be able to move to that space and sort of check out and do whatever it is they need to do. So in the spaces, they can bring either their own sketchbook and work, or they can choose to use different items that are at the space itself. Here we can see I have 2 different students working. I have like little etch-a-sketch things that have like, you know, you can just come in, do a quick doodle, sit, reflect if you need, and go right back to work. The students give me a hand signal that they choose. When they see me signal back, that's when they move to that space. The student on the left with the Etch-a-Sketch, I can say I've worked with for 3 years, and he just made it into the GT art project. He, in the last 2 years, I think if we hadn't had this alternate space, he's struggling still in so many areas. And I really believe if he hadn't had a space that he was trusted to own and go to as he needed, I feel we wouldn't have him in GT next year. So it was really nice that he was able to develop ownership and learn how to manage his time or choices of when he would use that space. You know, it's not to get out of cleanup or things. So having those honest conversations, the students generally will really be respectful. The student on the right, this is a space outside of the classroom. I actually set it up. I know at elementary level, we have pretty strong protocols, and it's, you know, you give them a reminder, and then it's a take a break. Generally, our take a break is they're supposed to sit and reflect. I see the kids once a week for 40 minutes. And so I sort of break the rules. The kids don't know breaking them. But I offer them those opportunities to be able to continue to create, because we all know that art can help work through emotional things at times too. So it's on them to choose whether it's a time to sit and reflect, or some days the papers, the tools are there. If they pick them up and use it to work through what they need to, then that is fine. So it's worked really well, even with kindergarten students, first grade, second grade. So those are pretty much those types of spaces that I use. And then I have a willing and able grid here that helps me. I keep this on my desk in the center of my room, like my supply table. So it helps me acknowledge, because, you know, sometimes, especially like the kid that was building this knife, he's a GT student and he's wielding it around at kids. It was so disruptive that you really just want to lead him out of the room. And it's hard. So I have to somehow just keep a reminder sometimes. So on my desk, I keep this little basic chart. And it reminds me to measure the expectation that was given to the student that's having difficulty, and see where they really are. Is this they're just being naughty, like they're able and unwilling, or is it more maybe they're just not able to do something that day, even though they're willing? So it reminds me to really reflect in the moment, to take a breath and check where that student really might be. Because a behavior, I had a principal that always told us all behavior has meaning. And I try to keep that prominent in my mind, because while it looks like they can be really silly a lot of times, there's generally something underlying that's getting them to be off task and deflecting what that issue is. So I do keep this right center front on my desk. So I kind of give myself a check. If someone's able to do it and they're not willing, rather than having a conversation, and I feel if I feel they're going to be a disruption, it's more about maybe giving them a task or an errand that's important, and getting them to just, you know, regroup somehow. So when they re-enter, hopefully they re-enter either to that extra space or back to their own space. Maybe it was just that little break they needed outside the class. So I also have one other chart that's in the slides. So if anybody wants the slides, I can definitely send them to you. And this is what I use in the middle of the year, especially. I call it my March Madness. When like you have a whole class come in and be crazy. March is just, and then we lost everybody in March. So we really did have madness, but I don't have anything to measure now. But so it just sort of, these types of charts I just keep right on my desk. It helps me reflect, you know, was I clear with the directions then? Because sometimes in March you think you're clear too, and we've been doing it all year, but you know, it's just, it is what it is. Some days it could be the weather that sets things off. So just really looking at what is the behavior that I'm seeing and how do I change it? But really thinking of how can I step back and allow the behavior to do what it needs to in a safer manner where it's non-confrontational. Whereas rather than a redirect, it's more of a, how can we move them smoothly through? So creating plans with the kids ahead of time, especially that have, those concerns or whatever that's going on in life, and having spaces ahead of time that are set up allows them to set up a routine for themselves. And, it allows them to create that self-discipline that's needed to get back on task and stay with projects no matter what goes on in life. And we know those kids have a lot sometimes that are going on, but we also know the world won't stop for us. So just giving them those opportunities to learn how to manage emotions, and if it's using a different space. So that's pretty much, so this was the intended project, and it was very allowed. Like, we have the sharp scissors that were created by a student, and my other student did not change his knife. So you can see here, working with our positive behavior coaches, we decided to help him make something, and we used it with the younger kids, and he was okay with it. We didn't present it to a brother class or anything, but we turned it with some glitter and some eyes and created something positive that we could use in school. So his creation was still used, and it was used in a positive form, because sometimes no matter what we do, we still even have those holdouts that even with these spaces we create, sometimes it just takes a whole team. So reaching out and talking with other staff, the teachers and things, and, finding ways to just get us to move on and smile about it, and learn from what we go through. So that's pretty much what I have. I do have some other things. Some of the conversations we've been talking about today have been, I'm going to stop the screen sharing, I think, for a minute. So some of the conversations we've been having today are based on a lot of the volatile situations that are happening currently. And you're kind of concerned when friends come back, how calm it'll be. And we have had students in the past that have had arguments in an art room where they want to become fights and things. And a lot of times it's easy just to say, okay, you're over here and you're there. But when you have, that can just kind of be like fire putting out. You're kind of just moving the situation along, and it's not really being resolved. And meeting these things head on and really trusting yourself. So bringing them in and scheduling structured time. So especially for the younger kids, I have these monster mitts, and having them play fun games together so that they're learning to work together. And this one has a little struggle even for someone who's really physically capable and fine motor skills are exceptional, because it has that Velcro, so even they have to work at it, and it's a struggle for both of them. So they can physically, play this game together, but see, they both have to work at it a little bit. And I'll tell you, it's worked like a charm. Most of the friends that I brought back in to do these types of fun things with, just finding those alternate ways to make it fun. And I think we can do that no matter what age group we work with. So yeah, so that was basically the share out. And if anybody want to open up the floor to anyone to discuss maybe what you do at the high school level with kids' sketchbooks or alternate spaces there, or anything you have at the younger classrooms, you're welcome. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. I think that's great. Thank you, Linda, for sharing those slides with us. And it seems like everybody's excited to have access to the slides. So you can share the link with me, and I have everyone's email address. I'm happy to send that out if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah.
If I could go back for just a second, because I had a question about your willing and able chart. I realize that you use that on your desk to help you check where a student's behavior is and how it is, how it's working or not working with what you're doing right at that moment. Do you share that with the kids at all, like at the beginning of the school year, and talk about the fact that there are some things that you're willing to do or not, or some things that you're able to do and then things you're not able to do, and then the difference between being willing to do it and being able to do it?
Okay, so that's a good question, Jason. Thank you. I do, when I have conversations with the kids, generally these safe spaces are a result of conversations we have together to make sure that they understand that we can acknowledge that we can't always, it's okay, it's human. We can't always meet expectations, even though we feel like we should be able to that day, things do happen. So when they do see things like this, you can share it with them and have a conversation. Even the younger grade K and first grade level, we can do a 3-step reflection, like what happened, what were you feeling when it happened, you know, and then we talk about what can we do next time, what are the alternatives. And by acknowledging these things, you know, and letting them see, okay, what I've been seeing is today you didn't seem like you were able to do it. You can kind of share it with them in a minor form at the younger level. And when they see this, it kind of validates that they're not alone, and it might make them feel a little bit better. So we can talk about when you're here on this part of the grid, here are the things we can do for options. We will change that expectation. If you're having that day where you're so overwhelmed, instead of having, you know, the artwork destroyed and things or being on the floor, we can talk about here's where it will be. We're going to change the expectation. And in this, we can write out what a good change. I have them buy into this by giving me suggestions. What did they feel the new expectation? You know, they might not be the lesson expectation, but what option do they feel would help them? Because they
Sure.
know themselves best. Yeah.
Sure. And it's interesting, as much as we understand behavior to be on an ever-changing continuum, I think it's interesting to look at the fact that it can be as simple as a student being able to do something or not able to do something, willing to do something or not willing to do something. But then the interesting thing about that changing from day to day, what they were able to do 2 days ago, they may not be able to do on that day, 2 days later. So it's an ever moving target. I totally understand that, but it's great to think about. I don't know why I never thought about it being this simple in a number of ways to
Yeah.
as a check for me as a teacher.
Right. And this came from the Lewiston School Department, which I'm not sure if it was part of the responsive classroom or we did restorative practices also. So it came through one of those trainings, and it just really put a simplified graphic for me that helped, because like I said, these the safe spaces originated there when I was first in 8 years ago. I had a lot of students that they would runners and they would leave classrooms, and we were at the main door. And the fear was that, okay, they're going out, because we did have students do that. And so I threw down art stuff at the door inside my classroom. So they had, between my file cabinet
Yeah.
and door, and
Yeah.
they could pull the door closed around them and create a space.
Mhm.
So I was trying to, a diversion. It was really out of panic that these resulted. And then, it's actually a thing that people use. So over the years, they've really been able to develop. But as my areas have developed, it's been the students that I've really watched how they've used the spaces or when. I do have the felt board space. I even have young men that are using the felt board space. Just the shapes are already pre-cut, and they just arrange shapes. They'll walk up, arrange shapes, and it really has helped them. I've noticed a connection there. Most of the students using the softer item areas and those things are students that we have that will attend outpatient programs with hospitals. So I find a lot that have some very serious trauma, finding that they tend to go towards those soft spaces where the shapes are already pre-cut, and they just arrange and rearrange, and they use them well. It takes a while. You have to train them. Originally, I had quite a few that would want to be there all the time. So we put like the sand timers and things, and we have conversations about when, how long a time, or if it's during direction time, some may need it that time, that there may be something that's just setting them off. So, but each of these things really developed from those students.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Hey, Linda. I think that there's a connection through, I teach at the high school level. And I think what I'm hearing you say, a very important aspect of this is getting to know the student, making a connection with the student. And so you have those cues that are there when something's off or not working quite right. And I mean, in fact, last semester before we went out, I had a student who had an anxiety disorder, and she really had difficulty being around other students. And it was funny because I had to create a space in the classroom for her to kind of be away from everyone. And at first I think, well, oh gosh, we need to share, but in her case, it was a different story. And the funny thing about it was she struggled online until finally she had an aide helping her that kind of gave her a constant connection. And then I got a set of emails back and forth in response to her drawing. And I felt like it made a connection with her. And lo and behold, she finished a whole bunch of assignments, put a summative portfolio together, and really felt like she was successful in the class. And I think it's that important aspect is really a big part of what you're talking about there. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, you're right, Charlie. Thank you. And thank you for bringing up that piece too, because that's another thing we were thinking of. We just had a meeting today where they're talking about what if we're not returning. We still have these students that we're caring for, and now we're trying to care for them. We can't just provide that safe space environmentally right here in our space, possibly. We might be still at remote learning. And that was like a thing I started thinking of this week. That's going to be a challenge for us. How do we still get them to reach their goals? And what are we going to do to help provide, or how can we provide that safe environment feeling through a computer to help them reach those goals still?
And what does a virtual safe space look like?
Right. Yeah. And so this is a really good question moving forward. And I have no answer because I'm not as tech savvy. So I've been learning a lot. And now that we're talking about next year and that possibility of having that distance, it's like, I feel like to honor my students, like you said, we've made those connections. And for new ones coming in, how do we recognize those signs? Like how can we create that safe space? What will it look like? So if anyone has any ideas, I'd love to hear them.
I think talking, like you said, talking with the student, you may discover that perhaps maybe they're a Snapchat kid, or they've got, maybe they post to Instagram or whatever. I think by talking with them, you might get information from them and let them tell you what that safe space might be.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. And our friend Rachel brings up a good point with a question in the chat box about, it's going to be very interesting to think about safe spaces if people are doing art on a cart, if you end up not being in your room because your school leadership has decided that they're going to take all of the rooms and divide the kids up equally, and that specials are going to be on carts. And so I think, I'm thinking, Rachel, my gut on that is there you go. Look, Linda's got the solution right there.
I did have to teach on a cart one year,
yeah.
And the students did request the spaces I had set up. It was by student request. So I had to minimize the items, and they were on the bottom shelf of my cart, and the students knew they could go and take them as needed. So, yeah.
And I'm just wondering too, since, we're going to be in a heightened state of this collectively as school buildings. I'm wondering if, Linda, there's a way for us in this group to come up with some group strategies about approaching our colleagues about establishing these in every room, because I think that, I think the need is going to be much greater than people are willing to admit right now. It's one of those things like, we survived the year, the collective sigh of that, we got through this, but yet I think it's thinking about what's going to happen in a few months if we do end up getting back into our buildings, even if it's just a few kids at a time, part of the student body coming one day, another part coming another day, or if it's a hybrid model or whatever. I think that there's it seems like it's a really good idea to think collectively as a building about having these spaces in every room. What are people's thoughts on that?
It will be good. I know some districts are, in like our district, they were talking about giving us extra professional development at the beginning of the year set up so that we can talk and collaborate. And we just met as art teachers this morning, and that was something they said. So Jason, you bring up a good point, is these are things we can be mindful about beforehand and say, hey, we would like a time slot to sort of present and talk about this. Because like you said, I can honestly say when we lost our art room one year at a school, and that was one of the first things the students, when I rolled my card in, those students that really rely on those spaces for calming themselves and things, that was one of the first things they asked for. So, and it's only going to help them, because if the students establish that routine, then it's there for them all day as well.
Absolutely.
Every day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Feel free to hop in with any questions, comments. You can keep putting things in the chat if you want. We can have some discussion now about how you're feeling about the students and the way that you know them, and if you know whether you're going to be able to have them back in your room next year. Maybe you're still in the unknown column of the bigger plan. It seems like every day when I talk with people, they're still in the unknown column. And some people do know already that they're not going to be in their classrooms next year, that they're going to be on a cart, or they're going to be traveling or mobile, or and so that's a big challenge on top of all of this, because you're trying to think about how to function and deliver quality instruction, have all the materials that you need, and also to provide for these kinds of safe spaces for your kids. You're thinking in many dimensions on this, and that's a significant challenge. So I'm empathetic to that. You guys have a lot to think about. I'm just looking at the chat right now to see. Yeah.
I just got news today that I may be aged out by our school department because they're not going to. I don't mean out, and everybody goes, "Oh, it's." I don't mean out, but they don't, because I'm at the high risk age-wise.
Mm-hmm.
They'd rather have me, if I can, stay virtual. And the other side of that is we're expecting there may very well be some parents that don't want to send their children back. And how are we going to accommodate and create spaces for them to learn in that will be virtual? So not so difficult for me. I'm not concerned about that, because there were some things that went on, I think, from this that really worked. And there's a lot of help. We're fortunate. I think we have a really good administration, and as typically they're caring for the students. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Other unique challenges, Charlie, that you bring to the forefront in this conversation? Oh yeah, Lisa's got a good question. Has anyone had all students want the safe space at the same time instead of engaging in art class? Or Linda, I guess maybe you can speak to what is it like when you have a bunch of students that want to go there at the same time? And I mean, obviously, I think that's like a red flag for you in terms of the lesson, right? You're like, you have to stop and rethink. Yeah.
Bad lesson.
We have a pre-plan and an agreement between us. So when we meet with the student, after like a student reflects about what's happening or how they're feeling, and we come up with a plan with what we can do each time, we actually have an agreement. So I try to set up at least 3 spots in the classroom and 1 outside, and they understand and they have a written agreement that stays in their portfolio. So they kind of choose the space they wish with me ahead of time. And then the agreement, it's even written down for some students that need that extra to see it in writing, that when it's occupied by another student, we understand that we all have those needs and we want to respect them the way we'd want to be respected, and they can choose an alternate space. So we do come up with at least 3 to 4 techniques that they can try. And so they've been very good. And if someone sees a space that, they've kind of brought ownership to, you can, especially with the young kids, they just want to go, oh, wait, but that's my, they want that. They don't want to, but they've been very good about breathing through it and understanding that, oh, hey, they need it too. So
Right.
I haven't really had too many problems with that because we've been able to make the agreements ahead of time.
And especially with younger kids, routine can translate into ownership, right? If they're used to going to a particular space on a regular basis and all of a sudden somebody else is there, I can imagine that there's a great deal of consternation and conflict in their own mind about, a sense of ownership versus routine. And so working through that, I'm sure is a good, I mean, that's a great opportunity to be able to work through that with them.
Yeah.
How do you, Linda, when you have students that do this very purposefully, and I love that you do it thoughtfully and purposefully with them, and that there's a plan in place, and that there's pre-selection and there's a discussion about it. Have you had what are the reactions, I guess, that you have from those students' parents about them going to this space versus being engaged in what's going on in the classroom? Because I can see it going a number of ways. I can see parents being incredibly happy that you're being so accommodating of their child in the moment and being able to roll with that. I can see other parents that say, why are you letting them disengage from the lesson and go somewhere else? I want you to keep them, so how do you deal with the variety of those different things, or what have been your experiences?
It's been pretty supportive. When we get to the point where we're doing a reflection, I usually will call home and speak with the parent to let them know, here's sort of what happened today. So, in case, like, say it happened with another student, especially want them to know, here's sort of what happened. Here's how we've talked about it. And here's what we've chosen to do as we move forward, to practice or to help if it happens again. And most of the parents have been extremely supportive. There are parents who won't answer the phone and who actually, when I try to call using the school phone, have already shut us off for other reasons. So then it becomes about this student really needs support. As they move forward, these choices are not going to help them in life to be, helpful citizens, as you will. So that's when it's okay. That student is the one. I make these agreements with that student, and knowing that they need that support, and they work with you. You can tell a lot of some of these kids are the adults in families, and it's nice if someone shut off the phone because they've had so many issues, and you can just work with that kid and then see it work for them in this class to the point where they're successful enough to become even a GT student one day just by completing their works to the level they can. Then that you're really teaching them that self-discipline, and that's going to go far for them. So, but we do. So most of the time the parents are highly supportive. Last year I had a student who's fabulous. He's one of the greatest art students, and everything was great. And then we became a sixth grader, and that's when we graduate out of our school. And I think we just got a little excited. Was not really willing to be, really well behaved. So it came to the point where then at that point it was sit down with the parents and have them come in. Sadly, his parent came in. I did have a couple other parents that did not show up. And that's hard, I think, following that with the student. They know when their parent didn't come and bring them to the conference. And that's where it's very sad, because the student now knows and you just have to have that open honesty and talk with them and address the behavior still isn't acceptable. Here is why, that logical consequence. And that when you're really working with this kid, that it's on that kid to really make that choice, and he's kind of standing alone, or she is standing alone. So it does happen, but I haven't had anybody complain and say, no, we don't want that option, which is very good. But I have had the non-responsive, and that's a tough thing in communities.
Absolutely. What's everybody else thinking? I see a lot of blank screens, which is totally okay. I told you you could do that, but but I'm wondering who's thinking, who's processing, who's wondering,
I have a
how to
question.
get started. Go ahead. Sorry.
I have, I'm going to go to 40-minute classes next year at one of my schools from 50, and I have 5 minutes in between classes. I'm wondering how to get the time to conference with the kids. I mean, I know we take time right out of the middle of class. Sometimes you have a really intense, you know, sort of thing with a kid right in the middle, and that's fine. And we all do that. But is there other, I mean, do you, Linda, stay after school to talk to kids? I mean, what's your schedule like? Is it possible do you have extra time?
Yeah, this schedule in the district I am in now, I have less students. So I have about 450 students a week, and the schools they really do set up a really good structure for us. We have about 5 classes a day. So I have that time and that flexibility, and I try to set up a fun lunch so that rather than it being a result of a negativity thing, we sort of meet as a positive lunch and we just chat a lot of times. So it's about trying to get there during lunch. The district I was in before, I was in one school in the morning and the other in the afternoon, and I drove during lunchtime.
Yes.
Yeah. So we had, over 700 students. So at that point, though, the school in the morning was very good. They would keep students after school as well, and it was a walking community. So the parents would come. So I would have students come in beforehand with family a lot of times. And but it's real difficult. Like you said, our schedules are not always conducive, and you're in such a hurry. And I just remember that environment too. You're in such a hurry that you have this energy going that's not always a great time. So knowing, this isn't going to be a great time because my stress might come out on the student too, and then it's not a positive. So it is really hard, but just finding that time outside to pull them aside and meeting them at the door.
Yeah.
And I'll just give them one goal as they're coming in. Your goal today is to blah, blah, blah. And here's your alternative space. Should you need, just give me your signal. Something as quick as that. And them, a lot of times, just hearing you trust them to be the one to choose when to go to a different space if they need. A lot of times that helps calm the situation beforehand. But it is, you're right, that's a really terrible challenge that we're faced with in such a busy environment, to make those connections meaningful for the kids and for yourself, and positive, and to keep them positive, because the more rushed you are, it does kind of come out as that stressor. So,
yeah. Well, we just dropped our behavior program for next year, and I was in a meeting 5 minutes before this one talking about, we're going to, on our PD days at the end, we're going to talk about creating our break space for the kids. So we're already, I mean, I couldn't believe how much it segued from that meeting, right? But we're really concerned because in my district, we are the school where the outlying schools send all the behavior issues. So now we have all these kids, and we're faced with no program, cut, and then dealing with it in the classroom. And the principal also said she's not taking kids in the office. So we're a little overwhelmed. We're hoping that there's a way, and I'm glad that this is recorded because I'd like to send it to my district. And but as some really good alternative ideas of how to do this. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
And so, Lisa, something for you and for everyone on here to keep in mind too. It's yet to be scheduled, but I'm talking with Dr. Maurice Elias, who runs the Social Emotional Learning Laboratory at Rutgers University in New Jersey. And he and I have been talking about the main learning results and the SEL competencies put out by Castle, and he's going to put together a 1-hour presentation similar to this, where he's going to talk about some of those logical crosswalks between SEL competencies and what we do in our arts classrooms. So his presentation will be incredibly topical and helpful for you as well. And again, we don't have that scheduled yet, but as soon as we do, I'll put out a message to everybody and let you know. And I also know that our SEL specialist and other members of our DOE team that are working on trauma-informed instruction with our students, they're working on a whole program right now that they're hoping to make available over the summer. They're designing and recording things right now, so that teachers and ed techs and adults that work with students in our buildings will be able to have some resources before our kids come back, because again, they're aware that the levels of trauma are probably going to be, even if you work in an area where you see quite a bit of trauma in a variety of different ways, they said it's really hard to tell exactly how intense it's going to be. And so they're trying to get a hold on that, but they're also trying to develop this program so that it will holistically help everyone be able to combat this in a positive way and not get overwhelmed by the wave that is trauma that's going to come through the door, on the first few days of school, and make you wonder, make you question what it is that you're doing, because I think the danger is that we start to feel more like therapists and social workers and less like teachers. But it's going to be based on the needs of our kids, and we're going to have to find ways of continuing to teach art and help them in every way possible. And so you may all end up being quasi art therapists by the time this is all done.
Sounds good.
Well, definitely not what some people signed up for, though. I mean, it's funny, Lisa. I'm glad you have a great approach with it, and I'm hoping that more people come on board with that. But there are people that signed up in their lives to be art educators, and they didn't necessarily feel like they signed up for this. And this is a big challenge. This is an extra lift for some people. So what we can do together collectively as a visual arts teaching community is help to hold up those that are struggling with that a little bit, and offer to mentor and partner with them so that they can feel like they don't have to deal with all of these range of behaviors and whatnot on their own in isolation, that we're all dealing with similar situations and issues, and we all have coping strategies and tools that we can share with each other.
Well, it's fabulous you're offering this stuff, because we need it. We really need to help these kids, and we can't just go in and expect, okay, let's talk about line, shape, and color. We're gonna really have some stuff.
Right, you can't do that while the world is ending for these kids, right? I mean, when they come through the door and they're in tears, or their fists are balled up, or they're, the teeth are clenched, and they just can't. I mean, we know from experience that those students, when we see them walk through the door, no learning will happen until you can get a hold of that and try to cut that fuse off, right? And figure out how to get everybody de-escalated. And that's I don't mean to paint a bleak picture for everybody, but I think that I would rather know, I would feel much more confident in knowing that you have more strategies and tools than you need when the day comes, than have you struggle with figuring out how to get a handle on this in your classroom. So, thank you, Linda, for what you presented today and what you do with your students, and the fact that you modeled some of that for us, which is great. And I know Linda will be available for questions later on. If you want to send her a note, you can always send me a note. Like I said, when we get more concrete information about Dr. Elias's presentation, I'll be putting that out to everybody so that you can register to be part of that. And when our team at the DOE gets their stuff together, I'm sure that will be coming out through your school leadership, because that's going to be like school-wide initiative type stuff.
Great.
Anyone else have anything on this topic that they want to talk about today?
One quick note that did come up again today, Jason, is
that
I forgot that at the beginning of this, and we had a meeting, and we were trying to get parent permissions for web, and we noticed we had about 2 pages at each school of families that hadn't provided permission. And when we reached out through the arts to those families for permissions for, it was an art purpose. What I had forgotten and remembered earlier today is that we are the safe zone for families. We're less intimidating. The music departments, the arts departments, we are a very safe space, and we do have a lot of family support through that. So I think, like you said, how do we become available to educators and encourage these spaces being set up, and how do we offer ourselves too as being that, we were just talking about, well, I'll start sooner in the year helping get web permissions. So it is that making ourselves available at the beginning of the year, because it's easy to forget sometimes in an educational world where it feels like everybody's worried about Common Core and all of this first. We feel like secondhand, but in the society piece of it, in the outside world, in the community, we are a strong, safe aspect. So I think you're right about how we come into the year presenting ourselves as being positive influence or help, or just, so always trust yourselves, guys and girls, because
Absolutely. Absolutely. And many of you have chatted with me over the past several weeks and months about how much society across the globe has turned to the arts for coping during this time. So it stands to reason in our own mind. It's very obvious, right? This is what we've been talking about in our careers as arts educators, is that, duh, right? It's like, it's a no-brainer that people would do this, and this is the importance of it, and this is what it does for people in character development and that social emotional aspect. So I think you have that in your back pocket that you need to really just, if I could put on a little advocacy hat for a second, just be aware of what plans your school leadership is thinking about for next year, and don't be afraid to talk about the positives that you bring in terms of character development and the safe spaces that you have as arts teachers. And use those anecdotal examples, or use the examples with your school leadership of students that maybe are behavioral problems in other parts of the building, but when they come to you, they're not. And so, use that to your advantage, because you have those experiences as arts teachers. And like Linda said, trust yourselves. You're able to do that in a way that other teachers just can't yet. And I say yet because I want all of us to work toward that common good of having students be able to have an environment in every classroom that they feel that they can do their best. That's always our ultimate goal, right? It's not just about them doing their best in our room, it's they're doing their best in life, in the building, at every level with everybody. So something to keep in mind and to be thinking about as you head into your summer break. Some of you still have another week or so of PD, so that's why I'm offering all sorts of other great things that are coming down the line. You'll notice in the chat box, I put a link to your exit ticket for this session. So once you complete that form, it will give you a link. After you submit the form, it will give you a link to your professional development certificate. And then once you click on the link for the certificate, after you do the form, there's a little text box at the bottom of the screen where you can put your name in, and then you can choose to save it or print it. And then it will be a PD certificate for you for 1 contact hour.
Could
Yes,
I
Sarah.
just say, I have really bad internet connectivity today,
Sure.
and I can't type anything. I just into the chat box, and I can't even go and click on that. So could
Sure.
you email that if you wouldn't mind?
I certainly will, Sarah. You put your email address in the
did.
chat box, so I'll send it out to you directly.
Great, thank you very much.
Yep, absolutely. And everybody, if you don't know how to save the chat box, if you have it open on your screen and you click on the little down where you type a message, there's a little box with 3 dots in it. If you click on that box with 3 dots, you can select Save Chat, and then it will save it as a text file on your computer. And then you can go back and access any of the information that was in the chat box at a later time. Just another quick programming schedule change. Your colleague, my colleague, Suzanne Goulet, was going to do a presentation on cross-content collaboration on Thursday, but that schedule has actually been modified. It's going to be a week from today at this same time at 2 p.m. So Suzanne's presentation that was going to be on Thursday is now going to be next Tuesday. And if you registered for it already, you should have gotten an email with the change of schedule. But if you do want to register for Suzanne's session, then it's going to be a week from today. And actually, I've got a minute, so I can pull the link to register for it. And I can drop that in the chat box for everybody too. And that way, you'll have everything you need. I want to thank Linda again for sharing today and for all of you being here to participate. I hope it was helpful in getting you to think about safe spaces in your classroom and how you can approach work with your students when they come back to you in the fall. Linda, you'll send me the slides and I'll send them out to everybody. Perfect.
I will do that. Yes.
Excellent. And everyone, you'll note in the chat box, I just put the link to Suzanne's session as well. So if you want to register for that, that's again going to be a week from today at 2 p.m. about cross-content collaboration. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here today. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. Again, you can always send Linda questions and send questions to me. And we'll see you soon. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Jason. Thank you.